Chief Scott Cranford, and this is Pump Operator Series Part 2, GPM Flow Through a Nozzle. And if you haven't had a chance, get back to Part 1, review the information that's given there, and then I'll get you up to speed with where we're at right now. Okay, we want to talk about some generic settings for nozzles and the pressures that are easy to remember, and you'll also find those in your test. Usually your promotional test, your exams for certification with the state, and they'll help you figure out the formulas to find out what GPM is. Now for the smoothbore GPM, we have here what is a formula, and this scares the heck out of a lot of people, but it's simple. The book gives you the formula. All you got to do is pick it out of a lineup. Also, once we give you these generic figures for the nozzles, you just plug them in, and it's pretty easy past that point. Again, I say easy. When you look at this, it seems like a lot of information, but take your time. The formula that they give in the book is GPM, that's gallons per minute, equals 29.7, and that's a constant figure. So that's a set number. It won't change when it comes to formula. And we take 29.7 times, D is the diameter squared, so the diameter of the smoothbore, and then we take that times the root of nozzle pressure. And the nozzle pressure are the figures that we would like to talk about today. And we just simply plug those into the formula and we run the calculations. And don't worry, we're going to do a couple of examples before we leave this lesson. Okay, some generic rules. Smoothbore hand lines, 50 psi that we need to run these things. Okay? Smoothbore hand line, all shapes and sizes. If the nozzle's off, the bail would show off. It'd be towards the tip to open, nice and smooth. Don't water hammer. And what defines a smoothbore is obviously the water is coming out of a smooth opening. Okay. No obstructions. There's nothing to break up the stream. And these are simply shapers. They can also control what the size of the orifice is. So depending on what the size tip and how much pressure, if you're appropriately driving your nozzles, depends on how much GPM, gallons per minute, that you're going to get out of this. So smoothbore, preferred by many. There's a lot of science that backs using smoothbore nozzles in attack because the water that comes out of it is in intact form for the most part until the stream begins to break. And they're larger water droplets, and they're finding out these water droplets take a lot of energy out of big fire. So even if you don't think you're getting that much done like you would with a fog, these babies will get a lot of things done if you're appropriately applying your tactics and you're actually hitting the fire. So that's a smoothbore hand line. We want to supply that particular nozzle with a generic pressure of 50 psi to drive that generic nozzle. So 50 psi is a number I would plug into here, and I would take the root of 50. And we'll calculate that here in just a minute. Okay, next let's talk about master streams. Wow, these are neat. I love using the deck gun off of an engine, arriving at a fire. I've got big fire until what? Until you need water supply. So if I'm flying out of my master stream anywhere from 500 gallons a minute or above, depending on the tip size, and I've only got a 1,000-gallon tank, you're going to be drained in a couple of minutes or more. So you want to make sure you have water supply before you decide to use one of these babies. So ground monitors, quick attack nozzles they have out there pre-connected to the back of the trucks. You can also do the same thing, and also off of your elevated master streams off your ladder truck. Great uses. Now what's neat about these are stacked tips. And each tip has a size on that. This one is 1.5 inch tip. So if I were to leave this intact and water came out this smoothbore opening, I would be able to plug in my diameter right here in the formula. So 1.5 inches would be 1.5 squared. And that's where we just simply plug into the formula. Now, if I want to get upwards of 1,000 gallons a minute, again, I better have water supply. I screw this bad boy off to 2 inches, and I have approximately 1,000 gallons a minute I can provide to get that fire under control. Now, in order to get a master stream smoothbore to work, this is again master stream, a lot of water, 80 psi is what I need to drive that. Handline 50 psi, master stream 80 psi. Next up, I have a fog combination or an automatic nozzle depending on what you carry at your fire department. But what's neat about this, I don't need a formula for the most part to figure out what GPM is. There's a handy dandy little indicator right there. So whatever I dial that to, so 95 is what a lot of departments like to set their nozzles at to start with. And some go up to 125 or to 150 or to 200. And it even has a setting for flush if you get any sand or debris in your nozzle, and you can flush it out the best you can. But most of them have little strainers to keep big stuff out. Okay, again, nozzle is off when it's forward, and open the bell nice and slow to prevent water hammer. Now these are also neat because a lot of people feel they're in control and they have the ability to change the stream and make it widen out very far, or straight stream, and they believe the straight stream is the same as a solid stream, and it's not. Well, there's these nice little metal teeth right here in the middle that breaks this stream up, and it causes the water droplets to be smaller. So this stream is more likely in a hot fire not going to penetrate near as far as a solid stream will. It may absorb more energy, but those are usually in enclosed spaces to where you can have some good steam conversion. Okay, so as we select down here, if we have it at 95 GPM, we have a small opening. Okay, if we were to put this all the way up to 200 GPM, that opens up that opening. So if I'm trying to drive this at 100 psi just to the nozzle, not including the rest of the hose or appliances or anything else in the line, I need more pressure, so that engineers got to pay attention to the pump panel. So if we open the GPM up as a nozzle person, whether we're inside or before we go into the house, is where you should really check, right? Okay, I need to pay attention and make sure I'm supplying my crew the appropriate amount of PSI to the nozzle, their tools, while they go inside. Now, out of a fog, again, versus a solid stream like this. 200 PSI coming out of this particular nozzle versus the smooth bore, I only need 50 PSI for 200 GPM out of this. Out of this one, it's going to be well over 100 PSI to drive this, plus the remaining friction loss of my line, elevation, and appliances. And it's going to cause a lot of back pressure. You're probably going to need more people, or you won't be able to do it. Alright, what I need to, again, drive the combination fog nozzle is 100 PSI just for the nozzle. So in review, 50 PSI for hand lines, smoothbore master streams 80 PSI, and for fog combination nozzles 100 PSI. And these will simply, depending on your equation that you get for your test or for your pumping scenario, you would plug that in when you're figuring your pressure into this particular component of the formula. Now remember, the fog and combinations, they already give you your GPM. So you'll be able to write that right off the side. And most times when you do formulas, they go ahead and they give you a gallons per minute. If you don't have the gallons per minute, you have to use this formula once again. The constant, 29.7, times, let's say you have a 2-inch tip. So the 2 would go in there, and then the root of nozzle pressure. If it's a 2-inch tip, it's probably a master stream, so I'm going to be 80 PSI. So the root of 80 would be up here. So you guys ready? Let's work through some problems and see what happens. And real quick, I just wanted to mention, if you have a specific gallons per minute and pressure that you need to supply to your custom nozzles on your particular apparatus, for your hose line, for your department, then you're going to go by that manufacturer's recommendation for that. Now for the Vista Fire Department, we have the nozzles that you can either use the tip as a smooth bore, you can leave that tip size off, use that as a smooth bore, or we can screw on the fog pattern adjustment. And we can supply that particular nozzle for Bella Vista on our attack lines anywhere from 40 PSI all the way up to 90 PSI. And if we go any higher than that, you run the risk of putting too much pressure on your nozzle, which can cause that stream to break up prematurely and not reach the fire. If you don't put enough pressure on it, we all kind of know what's going to happen there. Your hose is going to kink, you're going to have an ineffective stream, and it won't come out like it should in that format either. Alright, welcome back. We're going to go over a smooth bore hand line and how to figure out what the GPM will be for that flow. We're going to use in this scenario a 1-inch tip, and I'm going to show you where to plug all this in based on the knowledge that you have so far. So we're going to use our formula. Remember, that stays the same. You need to be able to pick that out on a lineup on your test that you're given out of several other different options that may be available for you. So GPM equals, here's the constant, 29.7 times the diameter squared times the root of nozzle pressure. And how we do this is we like you to break down each line and leave yourself enough space. So each problem will leave you about 4 lines and spread that out when you're working. Use the back of a piece of paper if you're allowed to use scratch paper. Have enough room so that if you make a mistake you can go back and look and see, oh, I forgot to square that. Oh, I didn't do the proper root for that. Now for your exams, more likely you're going to be allowed to use a calculator, so you won't have to do this by figuring out manually. GPM 29.7 times 1 squared. Because the 1-inch tip, the 1 goes where the D is in the formula. So we have 1 squared. Now we already know what that is, but we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. Okay, and then we have here times the root, and since it's a hand line, we generically need 50 psi to run that particular nozzle. So I plug in 50 as the nozzle pressure. Come down the line, let's bring that down, 29.7, and what's 1 times 1 in itself? It's 1. And then we take the root of 50, and that is 7.07, and we round to the nearest hundredth. Okay? After that, we run the calculation simply on our calculator. 29.7 times 1 times 7.07, and you come up with GPM is 209 for your answer. Now, that's what if you are no problems, no kinks in the hose line, and you were able to get 50 psi to that nozzle, and you were theoretically to hook up any type of a flow meter to that nozzle, this is what you should exactly get in theory based on the formula. The only way you're truly going to know is to flow test the particular nozzles for your department. Okay? Alright, next problem is an example. Let's talk about a large bore, smooth bore master stream. So the GPM formula remains the same. The constant 29.7 times your diameter squared times the root of nozzle pressure. Since it's a master stream, we know to drive that particular nozzle with 80 psi. So we can go ahead and plug that. The root of 80 plugs in the formula. It's a 2-inch tip, so we plug the 2 in where the D goes. So we have 2 squared. And of course our number stays constant, 29.7. If I take my calculator and I run 29.7 times 4 times 8.94, that's going to give me a GPM of 1,062 gallons per minute. Okay, hopefully that runs you through a couple of problems. Go through some practice examples of the smooth bore tip sizes at your department as practice, and have a little fun with that. There's much more to the math side of things, and it's not hard at all. It's pretty simple actually. Use the formulas and know where to plug those particular numbers in when you need to. Again, remember, smooth bore handline is 50 psi, master stream smooth bore is 80 psi to drive that. And that concludes part 2. Be sure to stick around for part 3. Thank you for attending this lesson in GPM flow through a nozzle.